Hi, how you doing, and welcome back to another video on the channel. What we have for you today is our wildcard video going into game week 16, and it is 94% rated with both triple Arsenal and Chelsea players in it. If you are new to the channel, please do subscribe, like the video. It's honestly really appreciated, all the support we've been getting so far. And this video is being recorded before Sunday's games have kicked off, but if any changes happen because of injuries, I'll put alternative players for the ones you see here today in the comments. So let's start with the goalkeepers, and there's no real better option than David Raya right now. Arsenal's defence has been looking solid again recently, and you could opt for someone like Sanchez from Chelsea instead, but after his recent benching, his minutes do look uncertain. It's not the biggest issue having someone like Sanchez if you want to combine him with Fabianski, but if both are dropped at the same time, it does create a problem, as you don't want to be using a free transfer on a keeper, and Sanchez in goal would mean that you would be limited for another Chelsea outfield player in your squad. So outside of those options, I do also like Fraser Forster. He could be an interesting pick as Spurs have good fixtures, and it does allow for funds to be spent elsewhere if you combine him with Fabianski, and Vicario is out for the long term with that ankle injury. For me, I'm going to stick with Raya and Fabianski. I just like the consistency you're going to get from Raya, and he's a dead cert to start every single game. Into defence, and I've gone for the Arsenal triple up in defence, and you can make a case for Saka, but he's 10.5 million now and possibly bordering on being overhyped. Sure, this puts a lot of eggs into one basket, the Arsenal defence, but it's a fairly solid basket to put them in. I think if you're not going cheap in defence, then the money is probably worth it to upgrade to these players. On their own, they're all great options, so the combination should also make sense, right? Colwill is our first Chelsea player. Great fixtures as far as you can see, with Brentford, Everton, Fulham, Ipswich, Palace, Bournemouth and Wolves taking it all the way to game week 23. 4.5 million is also a great price. Igor has actually played 90 minutes for Brighton in the last 7 game weeks and has got Palace, West Ham and Brentford in the next 3. It's also looking good from game week 21 onwards. You can always drop him to the bench and go with a back 3 here. At 4.4 million, it's not like you've got a high amount of value tied up in him. Lewis Hall rounds out a strong 5-player defence with Leicester and Ipswich in the next 2. You could even find yourself with a defender selection headache here, and we're going to talk about sort of how we're going to deal with selections later in the video. But right now, let's move on to the midfield, and Salah remains a focal point of the team. Arguments could be made for a squad with Haaland as the focus point, with City's fixtures starting to turn, but it's not like Salah's fixtures are bad. He's got Fulham, Leicester, West Ham, Forest, Brentford, Ipswich, Bournemouth and Wolves in the next 10, and I just don't know why you'd go against him right now. Plus, the rearranged game from Everton this week will make one of these upcoming fixtures a double game week, which is not only a great option for captaincy, but a great option for triple captaincy if you haven't already used it. Cole Palmer is the other premium here, and we all know about Chelsea's fixtures, making him a captaincy option himself every week with the potential for some massive scores. Now, the rest of the midfield is a little differential. Semenyo has taken some of the highest quantity of shots in the whole league. He's also 9th in midfielders for expected goals, giving a great mix of shot quality to go with the volume. Now, bear in mind he also plays for Bournemouth. He's not playing for Arsenal or Liverpool or even Man City. He's playing for a mid-table team and is able to get that amount of quality shots with that production. I think at 5.7 million, he's a really serious option to consider. Mitoma has 2 goals in his last 3 games, and he looks more involved in the attack over recent weeks. He also rotates quite well with Semenyo. If you want to bench one, you could also just play the other. When Mitoma has Villa and Arsenal, Semenyo has Fulham and Everton, and when Semenyo has Chelsea and Newcastle away, Mitoma has Ipswich and Man United. Sorry, Man United fans, you're on the wrong end of that fixture clash. So Bowen also rounds out the midfield. Even though West Ham aren't doing great, he's still very attacking, and Bowen is super involved. West Ham had 20 shots in the first half against Leicester City last week, and that was the most shots they'd ever had in a half in a Premier League game in their entire history. Bowen is actually ranked 9th among all players in FPL for expected goals and assists combined, and with Bournemouth, Brighton, Southampton in the next 3, I think he's a great option. If it doesn't work out, he's also got a possible new manager boost coming soon after. Up front, we have a 4 million striker, but Lancashire is the only player in this squad who doesn't play, and there's also around a 1 million gap between him and the next sort of striker that could contribute. which is a lot more than the gap you get between, good and poor players in defence. So I don't think it's the worst option to consider in the world. It also helps to afford both Isak and Jackson. Isak is a genuine captaincy option in the next 2 weeks with Leicester and Ipswich, and even though they're not winning, Newcastle are scoring goals and Isak has 5 in his last 7 games. After being rested last week, Jackson should be raring to go. He's actually got over 60 minutes in literally every other game this season. He's also a good price point because you can drop him to literally any other striker apart from Watkins and Haaland and save money in the process. So like we said at the start of the video, this team is rated 94% rated. Shout out to Fantasy Football Hub. I always think as long as the rating is low to mid 90s, you're in the right ballpark. There's so many variables in football that you can't take into account with the data, but having this sort of rating does sort of confirm what you want it to, really, that you're on the right tracks and that your players are going to be contributing more often than not. The team value is also great, 100.3 million. I'd like to think that any FPL managers who are still engaged in the game could afford that squad, and you're also going to have players like Salah, Palmer, maybe Jackson or Gabriel, players that you've had for a while that have gone up in price that you don't need to buy for this team. This price for the squad is if you didn't have any of these players and you're buying them from scratch. So I think that's an awesome balance that you can get if you've not, if you've struggled for team value so far. So the strengths of this team is, I feel like it's really well rounded. I quite like that there's lots of contributors in there. Points can come from all over. And the bench isn't too bad either. I think you're going to want to be playing a back three more often than not, but that does lead into some of the weaknesses in the fact that you've maybe committed to the Arsenal defence, and have you overcommitted? I quite like having cheap defenders and investing the money elsewhere, but like we said earlier in the video, if you are going to use the funds in defence, I do think the Arsenal triple up is just as good as any other team. Individually they're all great, so therefore I wouldn't necessarily look for them to be connected from the actual Arsenal defence together. I just look at them as their own player, and if you're happy to play them, that's great. But it does create a bit of problems in the fact that you are going to want to play them every game week, and that does mean that Lewis Hall or Igor, they might have a good fixture that therefore you can't play them in because you also don't want to drop one of your midfielders. But I do think that's a nice problem to have. So let me know what you think about the team. Let me know if you are wildcarding or whether just, even if you're not, hopefully this video has helped you with some of your transfer decisions. Please do subscribe. If you think that I've missed anyone out in this video as well, let me know and put it in the comments. Hopefully you've had a good game week. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you in the next one.